Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking what feels like an incredible shortcut, truly, a shortcut straight into ancient wisdom. We're diving into a text that was never, ever meant to be seen by anyone.
Exactly. It's the private, totally raw philosophical diary of arguably the most powerful man on earth at the time.
And it's just the ultimate historical anomaly. We are, of course, talking about the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and this book, it doesn't just give you philosophy. It gives you living proof of Plato's most, impossible political idea.
Absolutely, that famous challenge from the Republic.
Right, where Plato says that society will basically never be at peace until philosophers are kings. And this is the key part. These kings have to rule unwillingly.
Yes, they have to prefer the quiet life of a student over the chaos and splendor of the court.
And Marcus Aurelius is the one. Historians pretty much all agree he's the only figure in history who truly fits that description.
He was born to rule, but all he really wanted was the simple, rough dress of a philosopher. He adopted the Stoic life at, age 11? And he even said himself it was a strange training for an emperor.
So what we have today, these writings, it's not some polished state document. It's his survival guide.
It's his commonplace book, a completely unguarded record of his inner life. And we know from his own notes that he wrote these thoughts, sometimes literally amid the storms of battle.
Which is really the perfect context for this deep dive. We're going to explore the man behind the title, the just terrifying historical chaos he was up against while he was writing these calm reflections.
And how he sort of reshaped the Stoicism he inherited. And most importantly, what practical, timeless insights we can pull from his pages today. This stuff is often called the absolute religion of morality for a reason.
Okay, let's unpack that. The reality for this philosopher king. So Marcus Aurelius Antoninus becomes emperor in 161 AD. He's the adopted son of Antoninus Pius.
And he gets the best education money can by poetry, rhetoric, all of it. But his real passion, his favorite study, was always Stoicism.
And that passion was tested. Immediately and just relentlessly. The sources describe a reign that was defined by three massive, crushing crises.
All happening while he's jotting down these notes. He even dates them sometimes by location, this among the Quades or this at Carnuntum.
Just those little notes alone tell you he was a man constantly on campaign. Foreign wars from, the West all the way to the Arabian deserts.
Right, and it wasn't just external threats, and you have the plague. It was brought back by troops from the East, and it was catastrophic.
It essentially shut the empire down.
It did, and it tragically killed his adoptive brother and co-ruler, Lucius Verus.
Yeah.
So on top of war, you've got plague, you've got famine, severe economic problems. It was an absolute pressure cooker.
It's just hard to imagine how he kept any kind of calm while Rome was, literally falling apart around him. And then came the betrayal from within. That must have been the worst.
The revolt of Avidius Cassius.
Yeah.
This was one of his most trusted generals.
A friend, right?
A friend and a top general in Syria. And Cassius starts a full-blown revolt because he thought the emperor's famous compassion was just weakness. He found it contemptible.
And this is where you get that incredible glimpse into his character, when the revolt is crushed and Cassius is killed by his own men.
Marcus isn't happy. He's disappointed. He actually says he regrets being deprived of the luxury of forgiveness. He wanted to pardon the man himself.
And it went even further.
Oh, yeah. He demanded that all the documents that might implicate anyone else in the revolt be destroyed, just burned.
Yeah.
No witch hunts. That level of statesmanship is it's almost unimaginable.
It's an incredibly noble act, but our sources point out a really deep, unsettling paradox in his reign. Something that, it forces you to pause. This compassionate, forgiving philosopher. He permitted the cruel persecution of Christians. We're talking about the martyrdom of figures like Justin Martyr or Polycarp.
And the terrible suffering at Lyon and Vienne. It seems like a complete contradiction of his entire philosophy, but the sources are pretty clear on the context. It was political rather than religious.
So he wasn't really interested in a theological argument. It was about maintaining civil order.
Precisely. The early Christians, they refused to acknowledge the emperors, living or dead, as deities. And in Rome, that wasn't just a religious stance, that was treason.
They were seen as rebels.
Rebels against the existing order. And on top of that, their meetings were secret, which fueled all sorts of wild rumors and deep suspicion among the general population.
So it wasn't so much religious hate as it was a political calculation to hold a fragile empire together.
Exactly. The sources describe it as being similar to how a modern state might look at a group they saw as, quote, At once, Mormons and nihilists.
Meaning a group with a private loyalty that overrides their duty to the state, plus all these rumors of strange destructive beliefs.
It really gives you a sense of the pressure he was under. It's so easy for us to judge from our modern standpoint, but for him it was a choice between the survival of the state and the conscience of a group he saw as politically dangerous.
That's some deep context. So he needed a philosophy that could handle a world that was literally collapsing. Let's pivot to Stoicism itself. Before Marcus, where did it even come from?
It was founded by a guy named Zeno around 290 BC. And the Stoics, they basically had a materialistic view of the universe, which was rooted in the ideas of Heraclitus.
Okay, the perpetual flux, the eternal, ever-changing fire.
Right.
I think we need to slow down here because that sounds really dense. What does a fiery ether have to do with staying calm when your general betrays you?
But that's the essential link. It connects everything. That fiery ether, it isn't just fire, it's the fundamental intelligent substance of the universe. It's the soul of the universe. It's God.
So it's like an intelligent energy connecting everything and everyone.
Exactly. And if that intelligence is everywhere, then our own guiding principle, our reason, our logos, is a tiny piece of it. It's an indestructible divine spark.
And that links us not just to God, but to every other human being.
Which is the bedrock of Stoic duty. It makes the social imperative so much more than just, being a good citizen.
But the original philosophy sounds so impractical. Virtue alone is the highest good, even if you're being tortured.
It was almost impossibly demanding, yeah. The ideal Stoic sage was a king, a god among men, no matter his circumstances. For it to really take hold in a place like Rome, a society obsessed with power and reputation, it had to change.
It had to be tempered by concessions to common sense.
It had to become livable. So they introduced ideas like things to be preferred, things like health or a good reputation. They weren't virtues in themselves, but they were things a rational person could aim for. It bridged that massive gap between the perfect sage and, well, everyone else.
And the Romans also really valued its focus on calm resignation, right?
Right.
Even to the point of
Admissible suicide, yeah. A rational exit from unbearable suffering. Cato is the famous example.
And probably the most profound model for this kind of noble resignation wasn't an emperor, but a slave.
Epic.
The halting slave, yes. He lived this philosophy from the very bottom of the social ladder. He had this absolute trust in divine providence, and he famously said something like, "Deal with me as you will. I am of the same mind as you. I refuse nothing that pleases you."
And Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, carried that exact same spirit into his life and into his private journal. Okay, so now we get to the payoff. Let's dig into the practical wisdom. What were the actual mental tools he was using to handle all this pressure?
Well, he starts the meditations with something you wouldn't expect. Radical gratitude. Book I is just. It's a list of his debts and obligations to other people.
So not a memoir about his achievements, but a ledger of thanks. Exactly. He thanks his mother for teaching him a plain, inexpensive way of living. He thanks his adoptive father, Antonix Pius, for showing him how to have a business-like temper without arrogance. This was his foundation. Acknowledge the good you've received.
And that gratitude flows right out into this social imperative, which he had to somehow maintain while his world was falling apart.
He was constantly grounding himself in this idea that the whole world is but one commonwealth, that we are, by our very nature, social animals. We aren't meant to be isolated.
He had that powerful analogy for it, didn't he? The bee.
The famous one, yeah. That which is not for the interest of the whole swarm is not for the interest of a single bee. If you act only for yourself, you are literally violating your own nature and you end up hurting yourself.
But how do you do that when you're surrounded by, frankly, annoying or even malicious people? How did he handle the daily grind of court life?
He prepared for it. He had this morning routine where he'd consciously tell himself, okay, today you're going to meet some busybody with some ungrateful, abusive fellow.
He inoculated himself against the surprise of it all.
Right. But the key is why he did it. He told himself their bad behavior comes from ignorance of good and evil.
So they aren't evil, they're just confused.
They're confused about what's actually good for them. This is what allows for forgiveness. It's based on this kinship argument. Our minds are nearly related, being both extracted from the deity. We're all pieces of the same thing.
Which leads to maybe the best advice on revenge ever.
The best revenge is not to imitate the injury. If someone hurts you, the way you win is by refusing to stoop to their level. You maintain your own goodness.
Okay, that is incredible advice. But let's get to the core of survival and crisis. When there's plague and war everywhere, how do you stop that external chaos from getting inside? The inner citadel.
This is where Stoicism really gives you that internal sovereignty. He taught himself that nothing can actually hurt you except your own judgment of it. He wrote, "Do not suppose you are hurt and your complaint ceases. Cease your complaint and you are not hurt."
That sounds almost too simple. How does that apply to something genuinely awful, like losing his brother?
It's about being radically honest about what you control. The external event, the death, the war, that's outside your control. But your mind, he says, is an invincible fortress, a citadel.
Nothing can breach it unless you let it. Unless you're the one who labels the event a catastrophe.
Exactly. He was constantly reminding himself to retreat into that inner space that no plague or traitorous general could ever touch.
And he had no patience for people who just pretended to be virtuous.
Oh, none. He has this great little satire of the guy who proclaims, "I am resolved to deal straightforwardly with you." Marcus says honesty shouldn't need an announcement. It should be discoverable by the senses, like a strong smell. It's either there or it isn't.
And he had a similar view on true generosity.
The vine analogy, it's so beautiful. He says a truly good person is like a vine that bears a bunch of grapes without expecting any thanks.
The act itself is the reward.
The act of being what you are is the reward, fulfilling your nature. If you need a thank you, you aren't being generous, you're just making a transaction.
That completely reframes the idea of duty. So what about something like prayer? Did this Stoic king pray for victory in his wars?
He redefines prayer entirely. He says, don't pray for the external event to change, pray for your internal response to be strong. So instead of praying that your son won't be lost.
Pray against the fear of losing him.
Exactly. Don't pray for the calamity to go away. Pray that your mind can handle it with wisdom and grace. It shifts the focus from manipulating the world to mastering yourself.
And that self-mastery is perfectly connected to his view on time and mortality, which is really the final piece of the puzzle here.
It's how he puts his entire chaotic life into perspective. He's always reminding himself of the constant flux of universal change.
He writes that the huge continents of Europe and Asia are just corners of the creation. Time itself is just a point.
It's the ultimate cure for ego, isn't it? If you can really grasp that, then it doesn't matter if you live a long life or a short one. He says, no man can lose any other life than that which he lives now. The past is gone. The future isn't here. Everything is just dissolving back into its elements.
So if life is that fleeting, how did he view his own exit after all that struggle?
Not as a tragedy. He saw it as a discharge from duty, a natural end. He used that famous metaphor of an actor leaving the stage.
You quit the stage as fairly as a player does that has his discharge from the master of the revels.
Retire well satisfied, for he by whom you are dismissed is satisfied also.
That's just a profound final thought for a man who spent his life fighting on every front and never got the peace he wanted.
And that's why the meditation still hits so hard today. People call it the gospel of those who do not believe in the supernatural. The philosopher Renan said it was the absolute religion, a high moral conscience placed in face of the universe.
It's a manual for living a good life, right here, right now. So before we close this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with a challenge that comes directly from Marcus Aurelius himself. It's this moment of incredible vulnerability near the end of his book.
What did you write?
He looks back at his life and he says, "You are just taking leave of the world, and yet you have not done with unnecessary desires." And that just cuts right to the heart of it. So the question for you, listening right now, is this. What non-essential desire, that thing that brings you no real peace, no fulfillment of your duty, is still holding you back from living that life in accordance with nature today?
A fitting challenge. It's a reminder that even this great philosopher king admitted he struggled with the same trivial, distracting wants we all do. It really shows you why this private journal, never meant for our eyes, is still so essential centuries later.
Indeed. If you feel inspired to explore the source material yourself, look for translations by people like George Long, Jeremy Collier, or Merrick Casabon. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.